Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Krishna SM, and I'm the chairperson of the Women in Engineering Affinity Group of IEEE CUSAT Student Branch. As you know, this is the sixth webinar of the webinar series CUSATWEB conducted by IEEE CUSAT SC in association with VAG. And the topic of today's webinar is Introduction to Android Web Development. I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Anito Anto, first year ECE student at School of Engineering CUSAT. He's the founder and developer of Angel's Card online shopping app, the first place winner in VLSI IoT design contest in the 33rd International Conference on VLSI Design. He has also won the Macon Hackathon 2019 by building an AR-based navigation Android app for CUSAT. So just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the session, please type them into the comment box. I'll bring them up during the presentation. And we'll also have some time for questions at the end. So please be sure to keep your mics off during the presentation. So now without further ado, I'll hand over to Anito.
Hello, am I audible to all?
Yes, you are. Anito, you're audible.
Is the presentation clear to all? May I know in the chat? So let me start. Good evening to all. I am Anito Anto speaking in behalf of CUSATWEB webinar on the topic Introduction to Android App Development with Flutter. Android app development is one of the main demanding field today, since every services and systems require an dedicated Android app as their custom feature. So every systems and services could be controlled by Android apps. So these are much popular nowadays. We are approaching a saturation of services that could be made through developing mobile apps, which means every departments and every services is now accessible through mobile apps and mobile UI systems. So it is essential to know some basic understanding when we are here into looking into an Android development. If you are not a beginner to Android development, you could have probably heard of some softwares and tools that are mainly used with Android development for developing Android apps. Much more commonly used are Android Studio, which are popular in the early beginnings. These are one of the earliest approaches of making Android apps for Android. Today, more apps and services should be cross-platform. That means one app should be developed at once and it should be published in both iOS and Android. Now web development and web applications are now also popular. So when we look into an Android Studio approach, we could only publish the apps into specifically to Android devices. Today, more apps and services should be concentrated on cross platform. Apps should be more accessible to all, including Android and iOS, also on web platforms. So we should come up with much more convenient and approach in developing services and apps. So we here discuss on mainly Flutter Android app development. It is not an approach that uses Android Studio, but uses Flutter framework developed by Google for creating new kind of Android applications. So when we head on to flutter.dev, we could, this is the homepage of flutter.dev. We could see the uh, features of Flutter app development apart from native Android Studio development. So this is an FUI toolkit developed by Google. The applications made from the Flutter could be compiled to all mobile, web and desktop environments in future. So this is an new approach of building Android apps. This focus on fast development and more on design and cross-platform support. So let's look into the presentation. The agenda of the talk will be we will begin with an introduction to Flutter, then how it is different from the traditional approaches of building apps with Android Studio, and we will introduce to dartpad.dev, that is an web compiler that is used to test our Android Flutter apps. This do not require any downloads or installation procedure. We could directly head to dartpad.dev for testing our Flutter Android applications. Next, we will look on to familiarizing the terms in Flutter app development. We will look into a basic app layout and more kind of features, including widgets, displaying the text in a Flutter app and buttons in a Flutter app. Then we will try to implement an interaction with that button and changing the variables within the app. So this will be the agenda of the talk. If we head on to dartpad.dev, we could get a simple approach. We will get an online Android emulator and a code editor. We will see more on dartpad.dev when we reach there. First, we look on to Flutter. Introduction to Flutter. So, Android app development traditionally uses Android Studio, which was released on 2013 by Google. It was one of the main softwares used at that time. There were no competitors or some new technologies for building Android apps. It is only the software for Android development. It mainly uses Java and Kotlin for app development. Since at that time the Java and Kotlin, Java was the most used languages, and at that time Java was used for Android development. And the main defect of Android Studio in creating apps is it only supported Android devices. When more devices and cross-platform demand increases, we see a decline in products made from Android Studio, since it is only supported on Android platform. Therefore, we introduce a new kind of app development pipeline with Flutter. This is an UI and app development toolkit developed by Google and was first released on 2018. This uses Dart as a programming language. It is a new programming language focused especially on Flutter development. This is a similar kind of language with C and C++, but it also supports more frameworks from Flutter library to build designs for Android apps. The apps built with Flutter is cross-platform. That means it supports on both Android and iOS. In this talk, we will be focusing on Flutter app development, the Flutter way of building Android apps. When we look onto the Flutter app development, mainly we focus on widgets. The basic structure of a Flutter app will be always widgets. The app itself will be a widget. The app inside the inside of the app consists of another widgets. Like interacting with an app, we see a side menu, the main menu, and different pages inside an app. Each page will be a widget. Okay, like every text in an app in Flutter is a widget. Mainly, we have stateful and stateless widgets. These stateless and stateful widgets are the widgets for the base of an app. Okay. Like uh, like when we head on to the code that describes this, this is the first statement used in importing the Flutter framework into the Dart. All the code in the talk will be available at this site. The first statement here implies we are importing the Flutter package and then material.dart file, which include all the widgets that we used for a typical Android application. Similar to a C programming language, the void main is an entry part of Flutter. Void main initiate the app, like launching the app, which is indicated by run app function. The run app function initializes the Flutter app, and we come into this class. Each Flutter app starts from an stateless widget with an build method for creating a material app. This will be a basic and a starter code of any Flutter application. All the descriptive instructions will be given at anitoanto.co website after the talk. So you need not concentrate on the code, but try to understand the structure of the widgets. Like there will be always a stateless widget with initiate the material app. The home of the material app is linked to another stateful widget. Here we call my home page. The home of material app is linked to my home page, which creates a state. This block of statement is necessary for declaring a stateful widget, and creating a state of it. Okay, creating a state is similar like this. We should define a class which is a state of a stateful widget with a build method. This build method concentrates on a scaffold with an app bar. App bar is something that we see when an app opens and the title goes with the app bar. The title of the app bar is a text. Then the body of an app will be described in the body property of scaffold. Here we simply do a sender and a text widget aligned with it. So if we run this app, we could see an app with new CUSATWEB and an text in sender. You could get the code from the website described and you could run it later. If you want to know anything more about stateful and stateless widget, head on to the chat and ask specifically on this code, and I should explain. Let us head on to the continue with the presentation. So we see the stateful and stateless widgets that initiate a Flutter application. This will be an starting of a typical Flutter application. Every application should have a stateless for starting a material app and a stateful widget for initiating the first state of creating an app bar and the menu, as we see here. This app bar will be always in seen with this code app bar text. Similarly, the sender hello world will be seen here. Next, we discuss the widgets inside an app. When we talk about the things inside an Flutter app, we specifically mean something that goes inside the body of an app. Okay, that means previously we have seen the hello world appearing in center of the app, which is indicated with one of the widget. So each widget in a Flutter app can be inside another. Like a container may have a text widget. A sender may have a text widget. or a row can have a text. Okay, we describe the relation between each widget according to child and children relation. That means each widget inside an app can have another widget as a child or a children. That specifically means the container is an widget that have a child, not children. But a row widget can have a children. That means if we need to place the text in a row side by side, we require a row widget, and we describe a text as children of row. That means row has the children as two text that will give the appearance of text side by side. So each widget, the examples I have listed here is a container widget, which is basically a box, a binding, a box that in that capsules other widget. Like a text can be inside of a container. The specialty of the container is when we describe the background color in which the text is appearing, we can have a container. When we describe the text as a child of a container, we could give a background color behind the text. Let us see an example of that. Here it simply has a text, app bar text, like text CUSATWEB, CUSATWEB, and the body has a sender text. Let me delete this and give the demonstration of a container. If we include a container inside a body, we can provide some height like 100 and width like 100 and color as red. If we run the code, if we run the code, we could get the red box inside the body. Which means if we edit the height and width of the container, we can adjust the width. If we try to increase the width like 400 and run, we could increase the width of it. If we change the color to blue, it changes the color. Likewise, a container can give a specific we could give a specific height, a specific width, and a background color like green, we could get green. Also, if we specify the child of a container to be a text, then we could get a text inside. We could get a text inside that app. If we need to sender the text, we should add sender widget. Like if we add sender, like if we add sender here, this statement senders the text. Okay. All the code that we discuss here will be available after the talk. You could head on to dartpad.dev and dev and get the code running and test the app yourself. In the chat, I heard the height and width of a container is described in pixels by default. In Flutter, we describe it as pixels. If we need to get the width, like half the width, we could use something like media query. If we run this code, we have the text and the container with half the width. This width is represented in pixels. If you want something to be expressly described, you can head to on the chat. Let's move on with the presentation. So we have discussed the widgets, container, and text and sender. Each widget can be embedded inside another widget, like relation with child and children. Next, we will discuss on the row widget. A row widget is used when we need to place two objects side by side. Like if you want to place two text side by side in a screen, we should use a row widget, and we should describe the text as the two text widgets as the children of row widget. Okay. Let me demonstrate the row widgets. Just a second. Like we have a container. We can remove the height and width so that it will adjust it automatically. Instead of the child as a center, we could give it that as a row. Okay. So row can have children of widgets, and the children of the widgets could be a text like hello and another text. Hi. Then if we run this thing, we see two text very near, very near to near. Okay. Okay. The reason why the hello and hi comes very near is these both are purely text. That means there is no container enwrapping the text. So if we make a container widget and describes the text as a child of a container, and give a container a padding, that means space around it. If we run this code, we can get hello separated. Like if we need a container around another text, like CUSAT, we could give another container. If we place this text widget as a child of this, we can have two text widgets in side by side. Also, container has an alignment property which takes in an alignment if we place the both alignment in both the containers, we can have two text side by side. We can have multiple widgets inside a row widget. That means any widgets in a row will be always placed side by side. Similarly, if we need widgets that is placed down in a sequential order, we can change row to be a column. This will make the widgets follow an order of top to bottom. So if we run this code, we can get the two text from top to down. Like this. If we include another widget, like another text down, we simply add that widget to the children list of column widget. Like this. We had third line. You can get a new text under it. So basically, we have a container. Inside the container, we define a specific height to it, and the background color is defined with the color property. We can change this color to be anything like red. It will change accordingly. There are many colors available by default. You can head over to Flutter's official site for that. Next, the container has a child as a column, which means each element's placed will be displayed down by from top to bottom. Like first container hello with the text, and another, and the third container it will be placed below. Every code for discussing the code here will be always available at the site anitoanto.co. If you need something discussed specifically, you could head on to the chat and let me know. So the compiler that we were using still now is called dartpad.dev. If you go to the website of dartpad.dev, you can try this code, and this code will be available at this site. Then if you hit the run button on this website, you could run the code yourself after the talk. This Dartpad is the online compiler for Dart programming language. The Flutter uses Dart specifically, and the Flutter apps can be tested online with no downloading, and setup is required at the beginning stage. So let us write a simple uh, app that displays a text and creates a button to interact with it. So first let's look on to the displaying the text. For displaying the text, we use text widget. This is an state of a stateful widget that we discussed in previous slides, which has an app bar with a text and a body with a text. This example is seen in the previous slides. Like it will display an app bar with CUSATWEB as a heading and text hi as the body. Okay. Next, if we need to display the text in center, we use the sender widget, and we place the text widget as a child of sender widget. Okay. Like here we see the body to be a container and columns. If you replace this with sender and give the child hello, we run this code, if you run this code, we can get a text hello in the sender. This text can be modified accordingly that will be placed in the center. This is what we discuss in this presentation. Next, we use buttons to interact with the app. Like the button itself is a widget called flat button. We can have the button to be centered inside a column, and we can describe the flat button as a child of a column widget. Okay. So if we head on to the code, here we have simply the hello text in the center. If we include a flat button widget, we could get a button down the welcome text like this. But if we could not interact with that button, this is because there is no function that is tied with clicking the button. For that, we use something called onPressed property that takes in a function that it will look like this. when we run this code, we could interact with that button like clicking the button. Previous case, we could not click that button. Now we can click that button. Okay. There will be a splash animation that will be displayed by default. If if we want to give a background color to the button, we could specify the color of the button. Colors. Blue. We get that button blue. Nothing happens if that button is pressed because the on pressed property of that button is nothing. We need to specify something that is meaningful here in order to interact with that button. Okay. So we place the button as a column. Next, for interacting with that button, we should give the on pressed property, and the on pressed property should can be used for editing variables in the app. Like the variables in the app can be type int, double, boolean, or a string. Any variables can be declared before the build method. As example given here, we have the app bar and the body listed down. So if we want to describe any variables, we should do it above the build method. Here I have given example of a string text1 as welcome. So let us head on to the code and try to implement this. At present, the on pressed doesn't do anything because there is no variables or nothing described. So if we describe something like text1 to be welcome, and we place the variable text1 in place of the welcome string here, we can get the same output. Nothing has changed because this variable represents the welcome itself. But if we change the on pressed property to change the text, we can see actually we are interacting with that app. Like on pressed property, for changing an something that is displayed on the screen, for example at text inside a text widget, we should use something called set state function. Okay, with the state function we can actually change the text inside any other widget. Like if here we have a text with a txt1 variable, if we want to change this text interactively in the app, we should use set state function. In the set state function, you could change the variable txt1 to be something like hello world. So this should change the text inside this widget text, and we can get the text changed. So if we run this code, we can get at that present it is hello or welcome, but if we click this, it is changing to hello world. Okay, now it is hello. Then if you are clicking this, it executes the set state function and changes the variable txt1. Hello world. This is how we interact with the Flutter app. So changing the variables with set state can be done with on pressed property on a flat button widget. Like changing anything that is on the screen uh, is making use of set state function in Flutter. Thank you. This is basically how a basic app, a Flutter app is structured. It is mainly classified as widgets, as we discussed here. Anything in the app is always a widget. Anything inside a widget is what we see on the screen, and we can have widgets nested within another widget. Like if you want to display a text in center, we can have text widget inside a sender widget, as described here. And we can use flat button, and many buttons are available in Flutter framework. Flat button is most commonly used, and we can get the child of flat button to be a text for displaying text inside a button, and we can have on pressed property for interacting with the app, and we can have variables that can be changed during the app running, and with the changing the variables we could change something that is displayed on the screen very easily. So set state function describes set state function lets us to change something that is displayed on the screen. So if you have anything special, especially to be discussed, you can head on to the chat.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you, Anito. And we'll go ahead and take some questions. Please type your questions into the comment box. I think we already had some questions.
Okay, is height and width is in pixels or uh, dp? The height and width described in a Flutter app will be always in pixels.
Yeah, we have another question. What will happen for different size devices?
If you don't describe any constraints such as height and width for a container, for example, to be a container, the height and width will be scaled according to the screen size. Also, if we need to specifically define something to be half of the size, we can use media query. I have shown an example with the media query before. Also, we can specifically give two set of code for landscape mode and portrait mode.
Okay, are there any more doubts? So I think we are over with the questions. Is there anything else you want to cover before I wrap up, Anito?
So the examples that we discussed in the talk will be as a blog post on anitoanto.co. So if you want to compile the code yourself and see the results, you can head on to anitoanto.co. That's
Okay, thank you, Anito, for taking this wonderful session. And I thank all the participants for attending the session. And thanks all once again. And we'll be putting the recording link in our Facebook page. You can view them. So thanks once again, and we can wrap up.